There have been actions across the US this week, with an early casualty of the police state being none other than the Green Party candidate Jill Stein, who was arrested in Philadelphia. OWS Week also turned up for anti-foreclosure action in Chicago and Tompkins Square Park riot anniversary. Then on to Portland for Anaheim Solidarity March and Wells Fargo protest to expose more of the big bank's illegal practices. Poison water, poison air. We get sick and they don't care.
After several weeks of large protest actions, occupiers took a bit of a breather to reflect on precursors to the movement, to prepare for political conventions, and to plan major global solidarity events, including eminent anniversaries of the American Autumn. The past 7 days were on the quiet side, but Occupy never quite stands down from its vocal defense of the 99%. Various Anaheim solidarity actions against police brutality and repression continued, and Occupy Portland gathered with support groups in Gresham, Oregon, to stand up for another community which routinely endures police violence and misuse of force. Participants took a tour of wasteful city expenditures and learned more about harsh realities faced daily in less fortunate neighborhoods.
Well, the anti-eviction campaign believes in the enforcement of housing as a human right. We're not going to wait on the Department of State. We're not going to wait on government. We're not going to wait on the banks. We're not going to wait on anybody to make sure people are in the home. So no matter who it is, the banks, HUD, Fannie Mae, the government, doesn't matter who it is doing the eviction. If they move them out, we will move them back in. We will do what we call what is morally right, and that's enforcing a human right to housing. It was okay for the civil rights movement, to do sit-ins at the lunch counters. Although it was illegal for blacks and whites to be together, they did something that was morally right. And we feel like in this day and age with the housing crisis, we can't always look at the legalities of things. What we have to do what's morally right. So we say homes are for people. If you a victim, we'll move them back in. If you leave a property foreclosed, vacant, and abandoned too long, we'll fix it up and move in a homeless family. We believe in the enforcement of housing as a human right. We believe in taking back the land. There are no consideration of your race, class, or your financial standing. Evictions are just that, eviction. They're motivated by profit. And so there's nothing taken into consideration when it comes to eviction. Like you will hope that there's some type of grace period, there is none. But one of the main things we like to point out to the public is this. It's the lawyers and the banks and the agents of these banks and government who enforce these evictions, and they control the legislation. We call the court system flawed. It's full of fraud. You cannot win in court. So when we tell people about evictions, the only way to win an eviction defense is to win it in the street, to win it with your community, because the system has been bought and paid for by those lobbyists who work for special interest groups like banks.
Occupy locations also mobilized protection actions across the U.S. on behalf of homeowners. Occupy Chicago joined with community groups standing with Maria Dolores, who faces eviction by Fannie Mae and is, coincidentally, a community activist against foreclosure and eviction.
I'm here to let Fannie Mae know that I'm not going to go out from my house. I need my house. I want to keep my house for me and for my family. And I want to let them know that I'm a professional person, and for sure, if they give me an honest modification, I will going to pay, and I'm going to stay in my home.
In Chicago, we've helped a number of people. We have a number of chapters throughout the city, in the most affected neighborhoods in the city, in the south side, west side, and on the north side. We helped a number of people keep their homes. When the bank doesn't negotiate with families, the organization comes. We hold press conferences, rallies in front of the homes. We do eviction blockades when the sheriff comes, and we've been able to save a number of people's homes. The majority of people that are losing their homes are because the banks refuse to negotiate modifications with families. So the bulk of people got these bad mortgages, right? Subprime loans, The payments shot up, doubled, $3,000 a month. People couldn't pay those mortgages. The interest kept going up. And a lot of the banks that hold the majority of the mortgages were bailed out. For example, Citibank got $235 billion. Fannie Mae is one of the largest holders of mortgages in the country, but after they got bailed out, they refused to help families out. So about 90% of the people who go into a foreclosure end up losing their home. Instead of the banks negotiating with them to keep income flowing from the communities up, they choose to abandon the homes. And we have a situation in our cities where we have more abandoned homes than we have homeless people.
On August 1st, protesters gathered outside the Philadelphia headquarters of the mortgage giant to demand a halt to foreclosure proceedings against 2 Philadelphia residents in danger of losing their homes. Green Party presidential and vice presidential candidates Jill Stein and Sherry Honkala joined the protesters in a sit-in. Dr. Stein proclaimed that government should keep families in their homes and provide restitution for the deception and fraud that has robbed millions of Americans of financial security. She and her running mate were among those arrested by Philadelphia police.
I mean, the First Amendment does draw a distinction between freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, freedom of speech. And traditionally, press was self-defining as mainstream media. So it was fairly easy for the state to recognize press when it saw it. Somebody that published a newspaper, somebody that published, that ran a television station or a broadcast station. But with mass access to the means of distribution of information, it's not really clear what the press and freedom of the press means. And probably the best example of exactly where the law is struggling with this is in what's referred to sometimes as a reporter's privilege. Some states recognize a reporter's privilege. Federal law de facto pays some lip service to a reporter's privilege. But right now they're trying to enshrine that in federal law, and they're getting hung up on the notion of who's a reporter. It's something that's, for the most part, only formally recognized under some state laws. For instance, Illinois law recognizes a reporter's privilege, and it basically holds that you don't bother reporters about their sources unless it's a last resort. All right? There is no common law privilege for a reporter. Illinois law does recognize that a reporter is not supposed to be the first place you go in order to get information, that you exhaust other sources, and only as a last resort do you go after the reporter's information. Federal law, depending on which circuit you're in, doesn't recognize it. Although some courts, as a matter of fact, will do the same analysis. Is there another way to get this? If so, leave the reporter alone. Probably the most notorious example of the reporter privilege not being recognized was on the Valerie Plame affair, where somebody in the White House basically leaked the name of a CIA reporter in order to discredit her husband, or a CIA agent in order to discredit her husband. Judith Miller of the New York Times was hauled before a grand jury in that, and even spent some time in jail. That was an example where the privilege did not protect the information. It's a qualified privilege, all right, even where it is recognized. But right now, I mean, there is legislation in the works in Congress to establish that privilege formally but it's hung up on the definition of what a reporter is. Being a member of the press doesn't really get you any more rights out on the street than anybody else. Again, traditionally, law enforcement has extended privileges, de facto privileges, to mainstream media, but those are favors that law enforcement does for the media, and those favors can be withdrawn. I think of the example some years ago, we had an infamous case of a police officer with a drinking problem who beat up a female bartender, and it was caught on camera. And that became a bit of a media sensation. And when the mainstream media went to cover his court hearing, they did what they traditionally did, which is park illegally. The state of the law is still somewhat in flux. And when it comes to audio, there are some jurisdictions, including Illinois, where we have a statute which prohibits non-consensual audio capture. Right now, the status of the law in Illinois is the Illinois General Assembly likes it. As a matter of fact, they just extended it to allow police officers to record citizens, but refused to allow citizens to record police officers doing their job in public. There's a case pending in the United States Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit where the Court of Appeals has held that the ACLU is entitled to an injunction against enforcement of that statute. And an injunction has been entered on behalf of members of the ACLU, but that judgment is not final yet, and the Cook County State's Attorney has indicated an intention to appeal it. So for the moment, in Illinois, for instance, we have a statute which prohibits capturing audio of a police officer in public without their consent. It looks fairly likely that in the end that law will be struck down as unconstitutional, and during the NATO conference here, the superintendent of police announced that it would not be enforced, but it still is conceivably enforceable, so that's a potential risk. I'd recommend starting with the National Lawyers Guild, the closest chapter they can find, checking our website, because the Guild has, for a long time, been on top of just about any protest movement in this country. And if you get in touch with the Guild, you're likely to find somebody who's knowledgeable about the state of the law in your jurisdiction.
This week was the anniversary of the infamous Tompkins Square Park riot of 1988, in which hundreds of squatters and community activists against gentrification of poor neighborhoods, slumlords, and appalling living conditions were attacked by New York police with unrestrained brutality. OWS joined with activists from that time to reflect on the similarities between then and now. Time has moved on, but tactics of the 1% and its law enforcers against everyday people remain the same.
Where you have the police working for what you might call the 1%. And that does not necessarily mean the politicians and people in office who are often just figureheads for the real powers. I'm talking about the real powers that really make the decisions from behind the scenes. The underground government, if you will, the Illuminati, if you will, the ones who did 9/11, if you will. The media is their tool, the police is their tool. And maybe the police will wake up to the fact that they're in the 99% too, and they'll become reluctant to enforce for these dictators, but you gotta hope for that.
In 1988, it began the riots at Tompkins Square Park, where I tried to throw the homeless out of the park, and we rebelled against that. We fought all night. I was in Long Island, as a matter of fact, on my way back, when I heard it on the radio that the riot going on there. I was preparing to go to California and live in California. Good luck. I hear the riots are happening in Tompkins Square Park. I'm not gonna miss a riot, man, no way. So making a long story short right now, on 1988 in August, which is today, is the 6th, began the whole thing. We won. We got the park back. The next few weeks where we fought back and forth, and then later on, Mayor Koch basically surrendered the park. Something almost like Sagadi Park, a reflection of what happened in Sagadi Park, where we won that for a while too. But being with so many police here, we were demonstrating all over the place. We're going to Washington Square Park. We're going to the precincts. We're occupying, sleeping here, riding here. They tore down the stage here because that was a front for us to protect the protesters. They tore it all down. Then they built a 12-foot fence, 8-foot fence around the park with over 400 or 500 police to take back the park, which they did. Money and power and guns has no exceptions for the rule of law or the outlaw. And they came with horses. They came with horses, squad cars.
They were just wild.
People throwing bottles back and forth, etc.
Wild free-for-all. It wasn't like the way the police are now. Now the police kettle you in, circle you in.
Yeah, but
Back then they were just running around.
We were already in already. Then they kettle in. We were already here. But they had thrown out of there. They come at nighttime and they start tearing down the tents the same way. It's almost a deja vu all over again about the what do you call the Sagadi Park and Tompkins Square Park. And but the thing is right now.
Is this when they brought a tank into the park?
What?
Is this when they brought a tank in?
A tank? What was that?
A tank. Wasn't there a tank that was brought in by the police during the riots, or?
What do you mean by tank?
There was no tank over here, right?
A what? No, they had helicopters at the beginning. Had helicopters. No tank. No.
No, the police were like. It was like a free-for-all. They were scattered all over, everywhere as you looked. There was one there, one there. It wasn't like a confined.
But they got themselves together and they came out a big force, like they did in Sagadi Park. They threw everyone out here, and they gated the whole thing, renovated the whole park, tore down the what do you call the stage, the permanent stage here. This would be no place for us to muster around. And then Christadora took the thing right now. I was here. Physically, see?
At the time then, you could get an apartment for $300 or $400 a month in the neighborhood over here.
What?
At the time, you could get an apartment for $400 a month.
Oh, that's
it was the gentrification of the area where they wanted to get the poor people out, bring rich people in. Now it's $3,000.
Oh, yeah, no. Well, you don't know about what they did before that, though.
Back then.
Let's go a little further. Let's go more deep into that. They had a thing called Operation Pressure Point.
Right.
What they had to do, get rid of all the junkies, the druggies, get it out of the park in the neighborhood and the surrounding area. They spent a lot, millions of dollars to get this whole thing cleaned up.
And
let me finish, please. You're talking over it. I like the way you do it. Come on. I know this very, very well. I don't know about what's going on here, but let me say. After I say, you can speak over and say after that. It's this. So Operation Pressure Point, before we had the riots, they cleared out the neighborhood of all the junkies. They did the same thing in Bryant Park. They did the same thing in Union Square. Cleared the neighborhood and moving the gentrifiers, who the yuppies, about getting more upscale real estate, which they did very, very well. And with that, after that, right now, we're here anyway. We're here for a long, long time. They decided to throw us out. We fought back and won for a while, like Sagadi Park. And what happened finally? Remember, New York City has over 25,000 police, almost 2 divisions. LA has about 5 million people, about 6,000 police. We have 2 divisions. We have a $4 to $5 billion budget for the police alone in New York City.
Affordable housing has been a key watchword of OWS since the beginning. The Sunset Park rent strikers in Brooklyn have been demanding better living conditions, and Occupy Sunset Park has been there to support them in nightly vigils. New York City landlords have tried to displace residents from their homes in order to gentrify the buildings and raise rent. But these courageous residents have stood firm, saying don't push the 99% out of New York City. Back to Portland for an action against Wells Fargo Bank, which was organized by the Portland Central American Solidarity Committee as part of their campaign to expose bank's low-interest loans to private prisons and correctional units. Favorable loan structure turns more profit for prison industry, leading to more detention of immigrants and facility expansion, hence a need for more low-interest loans, leading to more profits for banks. A nightmare cycle for human beings who came looking for a better life, but were caught instead in the grinding gears of the corporate banking machine. OWS in New York City continued its support for the fine arts with Theater for the New City.
We've been in existence since 1970. We have been in this space in the East Village since 1986. We are generally known as a writer's theater. We do premieres of new plays for the American stage. We do between 30 and 40 shows a season in our indoor theater. We also do several large-scale community festivals. We do a big multidisciplinary arts festival called the Lower East Side Festival of the Arts. Over Memorial Day weekend, we do a big Village Halloween costume ball on Halloween night. And this production is our summer street theater tour, which is our main program for the summer. What's the name of the tour? This production is called 99% Reduced Fat, or You Can Bank on Us. It's written and directed by Crystal Field. The music was composed by Joseph Vernon Banks. This was our first performance today.
How long has it been in production for?
We started in June with, we have a company of 30 actors, and we started in June with a 2-week workshop process where we do a lot of different kind of skill workshops to get everybody working together, and we have a lot of speakers come in from different places to talk about different topics and different issues that we want to discuss in the show. And basically what comes out of those workshops, Crystal then takes that information and goes away for 2 weeks, and she writes the play and she comes back with a full script, and then we rehearse it for 3 weeks, and today is the culmination of those rehearsals.
Combining entertainment with an appeal for jobs, healthcare, and affordable housing, and reminding us that peaceful contemplation and emotional catharsis are as important to the ongoing struggle as mass street protests.
I'm the Artistic Executive Director of Theater for the New City, and we are a 40-year-old theater. This is our home. This is our permanent home. We own it ourselves. Our mortgage is way down over the years, but of course it's taken many years to obtain a permanent home. We go to the neighborhoods every summer. That's what we do. That's our payback to the city. We always did street theater. We've been doing it since I wrote my first street theater play in 1976, Mama Liberty's Bicentennial Party. So, and we go to all 5 boroughs, and we go to a lot of underserved neighborhoods. We go to Bed-Stuy and Harlem and the South Bronx. We're going tomorrow to St. Mary's Park in the South Bronx. But every year, of course, I write a new musical. It's a musical. It's a company of 50, including 30 actors and crew and 5 live musicians. And every year, it's a new story.
Occupy LA and other locations have been gearing up for A9 Choccupy, with solidarity actions planned around the globe. Free speech enthusiasts and artists wielding sidewalk chalk have been met with arrests and brutality across the U.S. for expression in a medium that washes off with water. The authoritarian crackdown ignores judicial rulings and borders on the absurd, but has been defended by citizens who value property over human rights, illuminating a basic difference in opinion perhaps as old as humanity itself. One long, hot summer of discontent ebbs and flows with drums of dissent, steady as a heartbeat, measured as a breath.
Get money out of politics!